Students want to play D&D, but don't want to learn how to play D&D. I'm a teacher who runs my school's D&D and Warhammer club. The kids want to play Dungeons & Dragons, but none of them want to learn how to play Dungeons & Dragons. I can't DM a game for all of them because there's too many of them. I've noticed that the DMs aren't even picking up the rulebooks. The players don't have their character sheets in front of them. They're just making up anything and rolling a random dice to decide an outcome. It's gotten to a point where the students who actually know how to play are getting fed up, and the students who don't want to play refuse to learn how to play because it bores them. I've suggested playing simpler games like Dungeon World, but then they stop showing up to the club because it's no longer D&D, even though they weren't playing D&D to start with. Additionally, a campaign seems unviable because A, if they refuse to learn how to, there's no hope of them ever leveling up, and B, the turnout numbers are inconsistent. Everyone needs to be playing the same game, otherwise, oh no, our GM isn't here today. We can't play and can't join the other group because they're playing a different game than us. Help! How can I dumb down D&D to a level that's engaging and be learned quickly in a way that a campaign can actually be played? There is a lot to unpack in this specific situation. So let's see what we can do to help. Hi, I'm John. This is Dragon Mind, where we discover our best selves through gaming. And today we're discussing what to do when it seems like your players are resistant to learning the rules of a TTRPG like D&D. Let's get into it. So this Reddit thread came across my notifications a few weeks ago and packs in a number of different problems that I've personally experienced at a few different tables. In fact, the top comment of this post addressing the fact that these players don't seem to want to learn the game's rules is just, that's your average D&D player. So, although these are specifically younger players, this issue of players not really understanding how the game's rules work or how their character works transcends age. So, although this is a specific situation with a bunch of different facets, I think we can address different parts individually, as well as maybe give some advice to this poster who has a specific problem that they want help with. So yes, let's start with the most obvious factor. Unlike a lot of TTRPG games that you hear from content creators, this poster is dealing with players that are school-aged children. And as anyone who's actually worked with children can tell you, how you go about solving problems is much different than adults. Trying to engage or teach kids purely through reason or logic is rarely going to work. Which is why when the teacher suggests Dungeon World as an alternative, the kids aren't really biting. To kids, a lot of times the idea of something is a lot more valuable than the truth of it. So it doesn't matter if they're actually playing D&D, but the idea of D&D is what's exciting them. To them, there's no problem just rolling dice and making up games, except for the few that want to play by the rules. So, for the most part, I agree with one of the most common suggestions in the comments of this post. Figure out who the individual kids are that more want to play by the rules, because from what the post sounds like, they're probably the minority. Let them be a group, while the other kids that seem to be having fun just rolling dice and making things up, they could basically play their own D&D parallel game. And like I said, this isn't something that's just with kids. I distinctly remember a table that I was a part of where we were all playing in the same world, but we were pretty much part of an adventurers guild, where individual rosters of players may switch out, but over time it was becoming really obvious that there were basically two groups of players with very different priorities. One group really didn't care about their mechanics. They more cared about the acting and the role-playing aspects. But the resource management or action economy considerations were things that, to be honest, they didn't really have the bandwidth for. While the group I was a part of pretty much featured, for the most part, optimized character builds with complex resources and action economies. So after a few months, the DM rightfully made the decision to just split us off into two different teams. One which was more focused on the role-playing that they valued, and one where he could throw some of the more complex combat encounters he was excited about, with the trust that we would be able to navigate them with mechanical knowledge. So yeah, with players of any ages, you are going to find situations, especially with large groups, where individual players have vastly different priorities or expectations of what they want out of the experience. So first, letting the kids create groups of like-minded players so that they could have the most fun with whatever version of a game they want to play is probably just going to yield better experiences overall. Now on to the second big point. With these circumstances, how do you make a campaign viable? And the answer is, I don't think you do, but I also don't think you have to. The main concern from the poster is that the kids aren't really going to get the chance to level up. Why not? I guess there's like an XP thing, but there are several different ways that you can structure your game based on player availability or fluctuations in attendance. That's really the main reason I created the 7 baby steps, which I've made 2 videos on at this point. Step 1 is to actually just start with one-shots. Now, I have no idea how much time this after-school club has, but there have been times I've even run D&D stories within 15 or 20 minutes. Whatever time you do have, it's good to get new GMs into the habit of using whatever time they have to present simple stories, because then it's less likely that they're going to meddle with the outcome of the story, rather than letting their players just have fun and kind of mess around with it. In addition, especially for the few players that are really excited to learn the rules and play the real version of the game, they'll each get the chance to try GMing and see if they like it. And if there happens to be a regular GM that's absent one day, well, just for that week, someone else can take up the mantle and let them play out a story until the week after. You can even just have characters level up whenever it feels right. That's how I run my games. As far as I know, that's how a lot of well-known GMs run their games. We don't play strictly by the XP rules or anything. It's just we level up when it feels right. Which I think actually segues me into my last point. The reason that I say that these players are resistant to learning the rules is because ultimately I don't think that we should mark them off as unteachable. Just because they don't seem to have an interest, or they're having a lot of fun playing this alternative game that they believe is D&D, doesn't mean they can't learn anything. A great example of this is actually a starter adventure by Wizards of the Coast, called Peril in Pinebrook, which does strip away a lot of the game's core mechanics into some of its simplest parts. For example, in that adventure, and with those pre-made characters, there are no saving throws at all. Even hazards or traps make attack rolls against a character's armor class. And all of the spells or cantrips that are selected don't bring up saving throws at all. A GM I know that was concerned about this lack of depth becoming boring for new players ran it for a few friends with little to no D&D experience, and they had an absolute blast with it. Again, a lot of times we as enthusiasts get in our own head or our own echo chambers and construct this thought of what a TTRPG should be, when in the end, as long as everyone's enjoying themselves, isn't that kind of the point? That being said, a wonderful mentor of mine once said, "It's really fun to play the game, but it's even more fun to play the game well." Now, he was talking about sparring in a martial arts context, but I think that same thought still applies to TTRPGs. Another reason I advocate for starting any group with one-shots is because if you have new players, rather than expecting them to learn too many rules at once, you can start to layer on different rules and help teach them the game progressively. For example, if I had a bunch of new 8-year-old players, I would start with a really simple scenario, like they're guarding a carriage to get from one town to another, and on the road, monsters attack. Now these would be even like cartoonish monsters, like maybe from Dragon Quest. They wouldn't be anything that would provoke grisly violence. In fact, when the monsters would be defeated, they'd probably poof into smoke. But the idea is now we can start learning how initiative sets up a turn order and how every character gets an action. I don't even think I would present full characters. They may have stats and skills. I might even do saving throws, but they wouldn't have a lot of the auxiliary features that define the different character classes. Characters would basically pick a weapon that they were good at, or they would have an array of cantrips. And then they'd take some turns taking some actions, rolling attacks and damage, and just getting used to the flow of combat. Once I was confident as the teacher that they had learned that first skill, now we can start stacking on some class features. One character might be a barbarian, their special thing is they can rage. Another may be a rogue, their special thing is sneak attack. Extra damage as long as they set up the conditions correctly. And maybe another is a simple caster that has 1 or 2 spells, but they also learn how spell slots work. Again, I find that what new players love about TTRPGs aren't the rules, the resource management, the die resolution mechanics. It's the imaginative aspects, and if you can get away with that with limited rules, isn't that what the whole rules light movement is about to begin with? And yes, I know there are wonderful games like Dungeon World that do this elegantly, but if the kids are having fun playing D&D, does it do any harm? That's a genuine question. I actually don't know. If you think so, please let me know your argument in the comments below. Oftentimes, I find that if you don't discount a student's potential based on their current behavior, you never know what thing is going to ignite their interest and ultimately create another TTRPG enthusiast. In fact, that's actually one of the reasons I started this whole discovering your best self through gaming. I had a child player, and I didn't realize how meaningful TTRPGs were to him. His parents told me later that after a professional DMing gig where he was a player, he actually asked them for all of the core books and explained all the complex mechanics, even though in the game he was mainly being goofy and just rolling the d20 when I told him to. One of the wonderful things about teaching is, just like DMing, we never really know the full impact we're going to have on our students. So yes, I know that behavior of resisting learning the rules can be frustrating in the moment, and if you structure how you teach in a way that allows for skill progression and not just expecting them to memorize a textbook right out of the gate, you may be pleasantly surprised by what comes out of it. So now I want to hear what you have to say. If you were in this teacher's position, how would you handle this situation? Have you ever DM'd for younger players? What were some ways that you changed your style to be more appropriate for them, if you had to at all? And was there a facet of this situation that I missed, or got totally wrong and you'd approach it differently? Again, let me know in the comments down below. Speaking of teachability and game systems, in the description are links to my TTRPG Swiftguard, a 5e adjacent system that I've been told is easier to learn than D&D, but without sacrificing any of the depth and maybe even adding to it a little bit. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about the game. Let me know either in the comments of this video or by joining the Swiftguard community Discord, also linked in the description. Until then, have an awesome day, everybody, and remember, your story matters. Bye-bye now.